Good morning. So today we're going to talk about quadratic formula. Quadratic formula is used on quadratic equations. Okay. To solve a quadratic equation that maybe cannot be factored. Okay, so we talked about solving quadratic equations by factoring and then setting the factors equal to 0. Well, quadratic formula is used for the coefficients that are inside of our quadratic equation in standard form. Okay, so what we're going to do for the quadratic formula is that to use it, it's going to have to be equal to 0. Okay, so get quadratic equal to 0. That means everything needs to be on one side. Okay, and then you're going to look at the coefficients. So you're going to look, A is what's going to be represented in front of your x squared, your b is what's in front of your x, and then your c is your constant. Okay, so remember quadratic equation is going to have two answers, two solutions. So the quadratic formula is going to be negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. Okay, and then this is all going to be over 2 times a. Okay, what's happening right here is that plus and that minus down here is going to represent two solutions. So you're going to have negative b plus the square root of b squared minus the 4ac all over the 2a. And you're going to have negative b minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay? So, you'll have two solutions here. So you're going to be using the numbers. So b represents the number that's in front of your x. Your a represents the number in front of your x squared. And your c represents your constant at the end. Okay? So let's look at some examples here. So here I've got x squared plus 10x minus a 2. Alright, so here it's in standard form. It's equal to 0. So my a is going to represent the number that's in front of your x squared, which is going to be a 1. Your b is the number that's in front of your x, which is going to be a 10. And your c is going to be the number that's your constant, so it's going to be a negative 2. Okay, so your quadratic formula, okay, it's going to be a negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, and that's all going to be over 2 times a. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have a negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 10 squared minus 4 times my a, which is a 1, times my c, which is a negative 2. It's all underneath the square root, and then this is all going to be over 2 times a, which is a 1. Okay, so I'm going to have a negative 10 plus or minus 100. Whoops, looks kind of funny right there. So 100 negative 4 times 1 times a negative 2 is a positive 8. And then this is all over 2. So this is going to be a negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 108 all over 2. Okay, so that means x is going to be a negative 10 plus the square root of 108 all over 2, and x is going to be a negative 10 minus the square root of 108 all over 2. Okay, so square root of 108 is not a perfect square there, so it's going to be a decimal. So if you plug this in the calculator, so that'll be a negative 10 plus square root of 108 all over 2, which is going to be a 0.196, which will be a 0.2. And then this one over here, a negative 10 minus square root of 108 will be a negative 10.2. Okay. All right, let's do another one here. All right, so here we've got x squared minus 8x equals a 20. Well, this isn't in standard, so I need to move the 20 to the other side. So when I move the 20 to the other side, it's going to become a negative. Okay, so I'm going to subtract it. And when I subtract it, I'm going to put it in standard form. So it's going to be at the end here. So it's my constant. So my A is going to be a 1. My B is going to be a negative 8. And my C is going to be a negative 20. So a negative B, so a negative times a negative 8 plus or minus B squared, so a negative 8 squared minus 4 times A times C, all over 2 times A. Sorry, that is a 1 there. So it's going to be a positive 8 plus or minus the square root of a positive 64. A negative 4 times a negative 20 is going to be a positive 80. All over 2. So this is going to be an 8 plus or minus 64 plus 80, which is going to be a 144. All over 2. Okay. Well, square root of 144 is a perfect square, so this is going to be 8 plus or minus 12 over 2. So now I'm going to have two answers. So I'm going to have 8 plus 12 over 2, and I'm going to have 8 minus 12 over 2. So my answers here, so 8 plus 12 is 20. 20 divided by 2 is going to be a 10. 8 minus 12 is a negative 4. Negative 4 divided by 2 is going to be a negative 2. So there you could have factored that one, right? So something multiplies together to give you a negative 20 and adds together to give you a negative 8. Okay? All right, let's do another one here. So here I've got x squared plus an 11x equals a 0. So it's already in standard form. My A is a 1. My B is an 11, and my C is a 0. Okay, so we're going to have a negative 11 plus or minus the square root of 11 squared minus 4 times A times C, all over 2 times 1. So we're going to have a negative 11 plus or minus the square root of 121. 4 times 0 is 0 there. Okay, square root of 121 is going to be an 11. So my answers here are going to be a negative 11 plus an 11 all over 2 and negative 11 minus an 11 all over 2. Okay. So that's here, we're going to have a 0, and then we're going to have a negative 22 divided by 2, which is going to be a negative 11. Okay. All right, let's do one more here. So here, remember we want to get it in standard form, so we need to combine our like terms. So we're going to subtract our x squared. We're going to add the 2x, and then we're going to subtract the 15, and we can't combine it with anything over here. Okay, so 3x squared minus x squared, so that'll be a 2x squared plus a 9x minus a 15 is equal to a 0. So my A is 2, my B is 9, and my C is a negative 15. So we'll have a negative B, so a negative 9 plus or minus 9 squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So we'll have a negative 9 plus or minus square root of 81 minus 4 times 2 times a negative 15, so that's going to be a positive 120 all over 4. So this is going to be a negative 9 plus or minus square root of 201 all over 4. So you're going to have two solutions. So negative 9 plus square root of 201 all over 4, and negative 9 minus square root of 201 all over 4. So that's going to be a decimal there. Okay. So we'll have, when we put this in the calculator, so this one over here will be a 1.29. And then this one over here will be a negative 5.79, I think. Okay. Alright, so that is quadratic formula. So I want y'all to try to practice solving quadratic equations by the quadratic formula. And then tomorrow we'll talk about the difference, knowing when to use factoring and when to use quadratic formula. Alright, y'all have a great day.